Happy Thursday to you folks, and welcome to Got Your Back NHL edition. LeBrun and Rishaug and Noodles today. Yes, Jamie McLennan joining us for the podcast of Overdrive, Calgary Flames fame, NHL goaltending veteran. Nice message of encouragement from Jason Strudwick coming up for Jamie McLennan. Don't know if you heard it on the podcast last night. You're going to love it, Noodles. Got Your Back NHL edition brought to you by Cross Country Canada Supplies and Rentals. We're so happy to have them as our title sponsor. Real solid, truly Canadian company. What sets them apart is their get-her-done attitude, a core value of their company. I've actually been down to the head office. They've got it right on the wall. It's really nice. Get her done. That's the way they run their business. They live by it. So do all their staff members. They provide equipment and supplies to all facets of the Canadian construction industry, and they take a lot of pride. Huge hockey fans over there too, some of them, and real happy to have them on board as our title sponsors. All right, let's check in with the crew. Pierre LeBrun and Noodles, Jamie McLennan. I think it's your second time back on the pod, Noodles. Good to have you, pal.
Very fired up, and I'm very excited to hear what Jason Strudwick had to say about me, because
you're not gonna like it. You're not gonna like it.
Of course not. I know he's either going to talk about my wardrobe, where I wear black all the time, or my lack of being in shape when I played in the NHL. Who knows what this guy?
What else could it be, Jamie? Take us through a few other possibilities. Let's see if you can guess it.
I mean, honestly, yes, the wardrobe, the body. It can't be hair, because I've got a lot more than him. Yeah. But yeah, there's so many things. Unfortunately, Struddy's one of my best buddies in the world, so he knows where all of my bodies are buried. So
he might not be after this. What I love here, Pierre, is we actually got Jamie out of sheer terror to completely just start running through the list of himself, of all the things that he knows are wrong with him, trying to get ahead of Struds.
Well, we're a family show here, so I think you'll be all right, Needles. But I laughed so hard this week when he was on Overdrive with you guys, and he was telling stories about when he had a clear break once, and then getting beat on trying to zip it across and getting beat by Chad Kilger. Oh my gosh, you guys were just losing it. It was so good.
Yeah. Well, he said it was funny that he said he was more worried about just trying to outrace Larry Murphy in a foot race. Hall
of Famer, but not a fast skater in his day.
So Struds and I were doing an Edmonton podcast last night, and I told him you were coming on today, and I said, anything you'd like me to pass along? Here's one of your best friends in the whole world, Noodles.
Yeah, heavy glove hand. Why did he have the heaviest glove hand in the league?
Was that the knock on him? It was bad.
Yeah, I used to think it was lazy. When I thought it was a lazy glove hand. Then I realized it was just heavy. It was heavy. It's like he had a weight in it.
You're
slow as glove hand.
And he's not even here to defend himself. I'm gonna have to roll that. I'm gonna roll that clip in for Struds tomorrow, for Noodles tomorrow.
Yeah, let him know. He needs to hear the truth. Not lazy. I guess what's better to be, lazy or a heavy glove hand?
And that frickin' laugh of his.
Yeah, I love it. You know what? He has said that. He has been consistent. He said his whole career, he's like, Jamie, you've got a lazy glove hand. Now he's calling it heavy. But that was, honestly, I always felt like I had a pretty good glove hand. It was just everything else. They scored everywhere else. So I didn't have a problem with that. I'm glad, you know what, we could bring up the fact that Iggy was +2 against him in Chicago one night, and he blamed Steve Passmore.
Okay, here we go.
It was it was just Struddy and his lack of mobility through the neutral zone.
Here we go. Okay, I'll try and roll that clip in my next podcast with Struds, Noodles, if it makes you feel better.
By the way, well, apropos of nothing, but I miss the days. I mean, the players are so nice in today's game. I miss the days when the goalie would stare down his D after or something. I miss those days. You don't see that ever anymore.
Yeah. Well, one of my most fondest memories early on in my career, and I was sitting on the bench. I got called up with the Islanders, so I must have been 21 years old. And Mark Fitzpatrick allowed a goal. And Fitzy was a guy who give out the laser beams here or there.
Yeah.
And I was sitting beside Tom Curvers, God rest his soul. He passed away recently, and I didn't know Tom very well. I just had been called up, and he goes, "Hey kid," he goes, "when you make it to this league full time, don't ever do that." And he was pointing back at Fitzy giving Dennis Vasky the laser beams. And I swear to God, every time I would run into Tom, like years later, and Tom was in management with Minnesota, I would bring up that story. And he would laugh. He was like, "God, I hated that. God, I hated when goaltenders had lasered the D." And I said, I agree. Like, I never, in my mind, I was like, never do that again. If I had done it, I don't think I was a guy that would do that. But it always stuck with me. It's funny how a veteran guy will give you a little tidbit of advice, and it sticks with you your whole career. And every time I thought of Tom Curvers, I would think of that little tidbit of advice in the middle of a game. He just leaned over, like, "Don't ever do that." And I was like, okay, I probably won't. So it was interesting. And, I had so much respect for Tom Curvers. Obviously, Mark Fitzpatrick was a great goalie and got a chance to play with him. But that was, you learn things along the way. And that was certainly one. So.
That's great stuff. Okay, guys, lots to get to. We're going to try and hit on a bunch of different topics here. So we'll kind of skip along topic to topic, cover a bunch of ground. We got, of course, the Final Four about to get started here in the NHL. Oilers wrap up. Leafs wrap up. We'll do some on that. Talk a little bit about Arizona as well. So let's get to it all. That's going to be our breakdown, brought to you by Kuma Outdoor Gear. They got a wide range of gear to fit all of your outdoor needs. Pierre likes the sound of outdoor because he's got the cottage on his mind, heading out there after the Stanley Cup final for the summer. And I don't know, Pierre, we'll get you set up with some Kuma gear.
Right.
I was talking to Matt from Kuma, and he said he needed to send you some stuff since I stole all your swag. So you might have some stuff on the way. Maybe a switchback heated chair. I don't know. If not, I'll send you one. The world's first heated chair powered by Bluetooth technology. It's got dual heat zones in the seat and the back. You can adjust the temperature from your phone. You can preheat your chair before you go outside, Pierre. So from your kitchen, you can stare down at your fire pit, heat your chair, and then walk out. I mean, I don't know if it gets better than that.
We just talked about bad teammates, and here you are stealing my swag. We just talked about bad you staring me down after I made a mistake.
I know. I know. This one was for you, buddy. So Noodles, when Kuma came on as a sponsor, Matt sent me a bunch of their stuff, and I was like, I just started picking through it.
You thought I was coming out.
I got this.
You thought I was coming out to cover the oil, and I stayed with the Leafs this year. So.
Honest to God, it is like, no matter what we do in our lifetime, and I noticed this as a player, there were guys who make $5 million in a year, and somebody would come in and drop in a box of T-shirts, and there would be a dog pile for those T-shirts. Like, I remember playing in Calgary, and Dion Phaneuf, I think, was sponsored by like Red Bull or something. He brought in, "Hey guys, here's some T-shirts." There was a box of Red Bull T-shirts in the middle of the room, and it was almost like there was like a kumite all of a sudden, like a fight to get a free T-shirt. And Roman Hammerluck, I would tease him. Hammer, I think, was making like $5 million, and he would steal anything that wasn't nailed down in the dressing room. I don't know why. He'd be walking out like his pockets would be full of. There's a razor. I'm like, you've got razors at home. Like, what are you doing?
Come on.
I mean, listen. I think, and I tell you, it's probably got to do more with nutrition in today's player than anything else. But I've talked to some players now that and I didn't really realize this till the last couple of years. But a lot of players, especially young players, that are single, that don't need to sort of budget ahead of time at home for groceries and family meals. But a lot of single players, they eat all their meals at the rink.
Everyone,
like so they come in and they eat breakfast and then lunch and. They leave the rink. They got all their meals. Like, I mean,
that's what it is. And you know what's funny? Going back to my days, was part of the team unity was in the morning you show up. There were bagels and stuff there, but then after practice, it's like, guys, where are we going for lunch? There was always honestly a 12-pack of guys going. hey, let's go here for lunch. Let's go here for lunch. And that was part of it. And some of the married guys would come, and especially some of the single guys, like you mentioned, the guys who lived alone, we'd go for lunch, and then sometimes lunch turned into dinner if we had a few days off and stuff like that. That was kind of like, that was the social aspect. It was like, what are we doing for lunch? What are we doing for dinner? And there was these packs of guys that nowadays, like you just mentioned, Pierre, nutrition is so important in today's game that these guys are fed at the rink. So you're right. You see guys walking out with, what are those called? Like doggy bags or whatever. Yeah, and that's containers. Their dinner for that night. Yeah, for containers, because they're like, this is our food. We're going to eat the prepared meals here by a professional chef, whereas we're going to the Mongoli grill down the road and having a $30 plate of noodles and chicken or whatever. So it's changed for sure. Everything has changed.
Wow. Anyways, go to kumaoutdoorgear.com. That was the single longest and best ad read in podcast history. It's the Quizmaster's job to kind of help manage content here on the podcast. And when I told him you were coming on, Noodles, he's like, okay, we need to keep it on the rails, though, because if you're not careful, there'll be no hockey talk for 15 minutes. There'll be no hockey. And we are now 11 minutes in.
Gold. We're bringing people behind the scenes. Come on.
I know, but the Quizmaster is getting stressed out right now. We just need to talk hockey.
I know. All right, let's talk some hockey. Yeah.
All right, dial it in. Great stories. So, guys, let's start with the Stanley Cup drought in Canada. Now 30 years old. Leafs go out. Oilers go out. I will ask you guys the question. Which of those two failures represents the bigger one, would you say, for the franchise? Noodles, is this a bigger failure for the Leafs or a bigger failure for the Oilers? I know that's a harsh word, but I'm not sure what other word to use.
You know what? I'm going to give you a definitive answer, but I can make a case for both. And the reason being, let's start with the Leafs. Because on paper, everyone's like, Boston's the big bad boogeyman. So all of a sudden, the Leafs and Tampa, I think, were evenly matched, but people thought, okay, this is the team that the Leafs can get by Tampa this year. And they did. So you're sitting there going, okay, Boston's out. You've got Florida that I honestly, and I'll personally say, I thought Florida's Stanley Cup was them just beating Boston. I thought there would be such an emotional kind of high that it's like, okay, we've had a successful year. We just took down the greatest team in the regular season. So in my mind, I was like, this is a clear path for the Toronto Maple Leafs, who are a really good team, to go to the Cup final. Like, that's what I thought. So I would say, just based on the history and what the expectations were, it was Toronto. But the Edmonton Oilers were arguably the best team the last, 40 games of the season. McDavid has a career year. Draisaitl is an animal. And now they've got depth. Now you've got Evander Kane. You've got Hyman. RNH gets 100 points. And it looked like the goaltending position had stabilized with Skinner as a guy who had kind of pushed through. And then you go and get Ekholm, and they settle everybody in. Like, Ekholm all of a sudden makes Bouchard look like a player, a rounded player. Nurse and CC, it kind of slots, like, it took some minutes away from Nurse, and it slots Kulak farther down. Like, Ekholm really was, for me, the missing piece.
It felt like it was there for them. I would agree with you,
really
Jamie. It did. It felt like it was there for them.
And so I'm sitting there going, like, in my mind, when Boston went out, I said to myself, it is going to be Edmonton, Toronto in the finals, and let's have at it. Because
Pierre actually said that on the podcast.
I was about to bring up my failure, but I'm waiting for Noodles to be done here.
my failure is everybody's failure, and I think we all were thinking it, going, there is a chance that this is going to be Edmonton, Toronto, and that'll be a hell of a series. But the only reason I'm going to say Toronto more is because of the age of that group. Because you've got Tavares now, who's going to be 33 next year. You've got Ryan O'Reilly. I don't even know if they're going to sign. Like, if he's going to sign. Like, they kind of went all in, and now that's 7 years with that, that core where they might have to adjust. Whereas Edmonton, there's no contracts that are coming up from that core group. So if I just look at the big picture, I think Toronto stings more because this might have been the year that the pieces all fell into line and they didn't get it done, where you're going to run back McDavid, you're going to run back Draisaitl because their contracts are still there. R&H, you got Hyman on term, you got Kane on term, Ekholm's just come in. Like Skinner now is going to, and I think Campbell's going to have a bounce back year. So you all of a sudden look at it and go, okay, the goaltender may not trust it, but I think they'll be able to stabilize. And then there's some work for Ken Holland to be done, where I think in Toronto, all the work was done and the group failed. Now what do you do moving forward?
Yeah.
So I'm leaning Toronto just based on the expectations and where that group is in their progression. I don't know if they'll run them back, where I think in Edmonton, they're going to run them back.
Yeah. Pierre, I budgeted 7 minutes for this segment, so you have 40 seconds left. Go.
Sorry.
No, you're good, buddy. We love you.
That's going to be more than 40 seconds. I'm totally with Noodles. Listen, the thing I would say, I picked the Oilers to win the Cup this year, as you know, Ryan, and you know, Ken Holland talked about how devastated his players were. I think he said it about 19 times at his end of season avail. But here's why I would say that both organizations actually have answered your question for you by their words and actions since their seasons ended. The Leafs are in complete disarray right now. They're still waiting on an answer from Kyle Dubas as to whether he'll sign a contract to remain GM or not. We haven't heard from Brendan Shanahan yet. Dubas ended his news conference by saying it might finally be time to do something big, i.e. maybe trade one of his core four. All of these dramatic things happen with the end of the Leafs season, whereas the Oilers, despite the massive disappointment, because the Oilers arguably were the best team in the league, at least in the West, in the second half of the year, it was like, you know what? Conference finals last year, took another shot this year, came up short. Let's do it again next year. That's what I got from listening to all the Oilers avails, is that super devastated, but we got a good team. Let's take another run next year. That's not what you're hearing from Toronto. What you're hearing from Toronto is this the end, and what do we have to do? And it's not the end in the sense that they're not rebuilding. Of course not. They're going to find a way to run a competitive team again next year, depending on who's running it. But the emotional fallout is completely different. And it's not an argument to be made by me or anyone else. Listen to the two season-ending media availabilities, night and day.
Yeah, I think it's the Leafs, guys, because I think Toronto was trying to prove something that it hadn't yet proved. And I don't think they did it. I don't think winning the round and going out as fast as they did, it didn't answer the questions that they probably had about themselves and the hockey world had about them. And I think the Oilers have answered those questions already. They're disappointed they didn't go deeper, but they've kind of been there, right? They got to the third round last year. To me, the Leafs didn't answer the big question about the Leafs, and I think that's why it's a bigger failure for them. The situation with Kyle Dubas, Pierre, have we gotten to a spot here where if I'd have told you at the start of the season the Leafs will go out, they'll win one round and then get swept in the second round, and it's going to be Kyle Dubas's call whether he comes back or not, what would you have said to me? And are we in that spot? Is this just strictly his call?
And it's funny because Noodles will laugh because I know how many times they actually had this discussion on Overdrive this year. The biggest trap in talking about the Leafs all year in terms of what's a successful season or not is a lot of people were always, losing the first round or go on a cup run. And for some reason, not a lot of people thought there could be an in-between.
Cup or bust, baby.
And the most Leaf thing alive, and I say this, listen, I know people's jobs are at stake here. I'm not making light of this, but of course they finally end a 19-year drought, but then they go out meekly in the second round. Now what? You know what I mean? It's like so many people are convinced that once they finally won a playoff series, that being unburdened mentally would just have them jump out. And I will tell you, the opposite happened in the first game and a half of that series, is that they look like they had enjoyed that moment so much they weren't ready for Florida.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so this is the worst gray area here. Finally won a playoff series, but then not a very good performance in the second round against the 8 seeds. Now a bit of a fake 8 seed in the sense that they won the President's Trophy a year ago, but still a team that you should beat if you're serious about your Cup contender status. So I think it was not good enough, and I think again what you heard from Kyle Dubas on Monday suggests that he's come to the same realization to some degree if he's still GM. And again, it's not about just this year. It's 7 years of taking swings at it with a very similar core, and it just hasn't worked when it really mattered. That Game 3 performance in Florida, the series was still there where you can make a series of it, and coming out with that kind of effort, that's what I'm going to remember really from that series against Florida, where it was still there after double off days, by the way, and to come out and basically not show up in Game 3.
Yeah, I agree. It's for me. I think it's like a little bit weird because I think Kyle Dubas's press conference threw everyone for a loop, because I don't know if it was a brilliant move by him, because all of a sudden,
like where's the leverage? Where?
Well, but the thing is like for him, he's like, well, I'm not sure if I want the job, and I got to talk to my family. It's been very hard. All of a sudden, nobody's talking about his body of work and failure. It's like,
does he want to come back?
Or does he want to come back? I hope he's okay. And I think there would be questions, and these are valid questions, as to if he does get the job or accept the job, or they want to move forward with him, is he okay to handle this type of stress moving forward? Because this is he made it with human, which is rare. Like, this is a business, and he was like, hold on a second here. I've got to take a look at the actual human side. And this is my family. This is the stress. It's been through a lot. And you're going, okay, hold on a second here. So he almost turned the tables where people were like, hey, we want to talk about this core that you stood by, staked your career on it all of a sudden. And he's like, well, I'm not sure if I want to do this anymore. I got to talk with my family. I got to sort this out. Nobody's talking about him running back or taking a flyer on Matt Murray and all of these things. It's like, oh, I hope he gets a job, or I hope he wants it. He actually shifted the narrative, and I don't know if MLSE was ready for that either. So it'd be interesting to see how that shakes out.
I'm pretty confident in saying that I don't think Brendan Shanahan and Leafs ownership knew that was coming in terms of, and I just think it's Kyle Dubas being super honest and emotional in the moment. I don't think it was a game plan on his part, in my opinion. I just think he has been pretty transparent over the years in how he deals with the media, and I think that just all came pouring out.
The other part of that too, Pierre, was him saying if it's not Toronto, it's not anywhere. I mean, he's been linked to all over the place. He's been linked to.
I had to. He first kind of hinted at that in an answer to Chris Johnson's question, and then I felt the need to go back with the last question and say, let me just be clear here. Are you saying you wouldn't go anywhere if you're not Leafs GM? And he said, correct. And believe me, the people who at Fenway who run the Pittsburgh Penguins certainly heard that. And so, that's no one saw that coming.
So if it's not Toronto, then he potentially lays low for a year, regroups, and spends some time with the family, figure out what the future holds.
Well, I don't know about a year. I mean, there could be openings in January, but we'll see where it goes. I mean, I don't know why I think this, but I could be totally wrong about this, because the fact that it's taken this long this week makes you, and then this is, you got to be careful, but I wonder if it's really been a struggle of a decision for him. But I think he ends up re-signing, but we'll see. I mean, it's obviously not been an easy decision.
I'm going to chuck something out into the ether here, and it'll probably be inflammatory. I don't mean it that way. I'm just kind of connecting two dots. So Kyle Dubas takes a step back. Let's say that's the way it goes. And he's earned it if that's what he needs to do. And then he's in the market for general manager jobs later this season, or maybe at the start of next season. Guys, I'm going to fire a little soundbite that happened in Edmonton here the other day.
Boy. Being back in both roles, like the general manager, do you want to sort of your hands on the wheel as the GM next season?
For the 23-24 season?
Yeah.
I do.
So Ken Holland, general manager for one more year here in Edmonton. Pierre, I believe that there's going to be a process that happens out here where they start figuring out what succession looks like, a succession plan. I think they identify internal candidates, but I also think due diligence suggests they need to identify external candidates as well. Why wouldn't you? How coveted would that job be in Edmonton? So I think in the search for external candidates, if Kyle Dubas is taking a step back and a breather and is looking for employment next season in the National Hockey League as a general manager, I'm not trying to explode the internet here. I'm just sort of connecting two dots. How crazy am I?
I think you just radioed yourself as what you did.
I did. I definitely did.
No, it'll be interesting. I mean, clearly what I got from Ken Holland's news conference, and I haven't spoken to him myself, but just listening to what you guys were talking to him about yesterday, it sounds to me like he wants to work through the final year of his deal, and then I think it sounds like he's ready to step away after that. There's some good internal candidates, obviously, Keith Gretzky, Brad Holland, Steve Stais. Now, Steve Stais is going to be, I think, a GM somewhere one day. I just don't know if it's in Edmonton or somewhere else. I mean, he's got that relationship with Michael Andlauer, and of course, Andlauer is trying to buy the Ottawa Senators. That led to some speculation about Stais' future potentially if Andlauer ends up with the Senators. But, yeah, I mean,
succession, man. You got to figure out how the next guy's going to be.
Okay, I'm going to
go ahead, Noodles.
And this is no slight on Kyle Dubas, but his vision hasn't worked in the playoffs. So, again, whether it's roster construction, just sticking with the core four, doing whatever, again, that's regular season and the program that he's built, very respectable, very classy, very everything. I pointed this out yesterday, off air and on air with the guys, saying, keep in mind, he's at a blank check. Like MLSC, how many AGMs, how many, having a blank check, that's not his fault. That's the organization he runs. So, he's been able to use these resources where it's an analytics team. It's not just one guy. It's sports science team. It's not just, one or two guys. Keep in mind organizations that he goes to or potentially goes to if he leaves Toronto. This is all if. Not everybody works with a blank check. Not everybody can't. How do you sell to an owner who's very budget conscious? Now, I'm not saying wherever. We need 10 one-way contracts in the minors, and all of them are $750 or $800. And they're going, okay, well, hold on a second here. Our AHL budget is usually this. I'm just pointing out that he might have to go to an organization and adjust his mindset or thought process too, as to where in Toronto it's been, unlimited resources, unlimited whatever. I always joke, and I say this respectfully, the Ottawa Senators, Pierre Dorian doesn't work with, doesn't have a front office staff of 80 people. There's certain organizations that have to be very mindful of budgets, have to answer for questions where it's like
Carolina Hurricanes.
Well, okay, it's a prime example. What I'm saying is that, Kyle's situation, if he goes to a new one, not everybody has a blank check where you can go, hey, we're going to have a $10 million budget in the AHL. Some teams work on $3 million budgets and players that and again, that's not on Kyle. It's his situation. But everyone, you have to be mindful that you're working for a different group as to MLSE. If he goes to a singular, Daryl Cates has deep pockets. There's no doubt about it. But, you still have to answer your questions going, why is there a guy making $3 million in the minors that you've decided to bury a contract or buy this person out and do these things? So, again, it's more, I think, him choosing the scenario, he has to be mindful that he might have to adjust his mindset, too, based on that current ownership.
The other thing that hasn't been talked about, Pierre, is the idea that the next general manager in Edmonton is going to negotiate the McDavid deal.
Yeah.
You need a sage hand at the wheel for that, man.
And the Draisaitl deal.
And the Draisaitl deal, right? Yeah. So you want a first-timer in there? Maybe that's why Ken Holland, we've heard maybe he'd consider sticking around as the POHO, and help whoever the next general manager is. But it's
or senior advisor or whatever.
Yeah, exactly, right? So there's some important stuff.
Based out of Vernon, BC, maybe? No, I'm just kidding.
I'm not saying that.
No. These are important questions. And in the meantime, a name that we haven't mentioned in all of this, and I'm serious when I say it's not because I've heard something, but I'm saying there is a free agent GM as of June 30th called Brad Treliving.
Yeah.
who has worked in Alberta, who if the Leafs have an opening, how could he not throw his hat in there? I'm just saying.
If there's an external search, and a succession plan that's going to be put in place, and I think there will have to be, it's the responsible thing to do. They should be working on this already. And there's suggestion that Steve Staios there's concern about him going to the Andlauer group if they end up in Ottawa, and they really want to keep Steve Staios. Maybe they have to act a little bit quicker. But Ken Holland's going to be the GM. They got to figure out who the next guy is, do your search, identify that, and solidify yourself for next season. It's too important an off season to not have that position solidified by the second half of next season even. So I think it's something that they definitely need to focus on. Okay, Quizmaster losing his marbles because we got a lot to get to. So I'm going to call an audible here, you guys. Everything else from here on in we're doing is quick hitters.
Okay.
Jamie, the rule on quick hitters is if you go too long, I start yelling at you. And I have sound effects here. I can just start buzzing you off the podcast.
It'll be quick. Believe me, I've done the quiz many times. I will give you 15 to
I think he just rolled his eyes.
Yeah. So, and I had a sort of a content plan. I'm throwing it out the window. So, quick hitters, our brand new segment brought to you by Liberty Smart Security. Totally had it planned that was going to be their segment today. Company that specializes in having your back, high quality advanced smart security systems for your home or your business. They use leading edge technology to protect the things that you value most in life. Your home is your castle. Protect it with Liberty Smart Security. And maybe some NHL locker rooms should be using a Liberty Smart Security system to protect the things they have in their locker room for hockey players that are pillaging the freebies in the rooms, James.
The Roman Hammerlicks of the world.
Okay, just quick hitters here. Pierre, anything on the Ottawa Senators situation that you think is relevant or new in the moment here with the group of owners? Where's it at? Oh, Noodles, I think Pierre froze.
Uh-oh.
Look at him.
That's all right.
He froze with a big smile on his face, though. I will say that.
I'm fine with that. You can jump the next question, and we'll get him to answer the Ottawa Senators.
Do you know what I can
when it comes back?
You know what I can actually do on this podcast? It's kind of, and by the way, for those of you who might be new to Got Your Back, I'm doing all the technical end myself today because Zuby, our tech, is on vacation. So I'm at the controls here. So we're in the middle of taping a podcast. We've lost our core secondary host, and now I'm having to host simultaneously with Jamie while trying to troubleshoot. But we have the technology. I think I can even just call Pierre and get him back on the podcast. Let's see if this works. Oh, there he is. Let's see. Because we got a great shot of him. It's a smiling face there.
Yeah, it's a good shot. Yeah,
he looks great.
By the phone.
He looks great. Let's see. Can we get him over the phone? He's not going to scream me now, is he?
Is this something where the Quizmaster, the Quizmaster gets a little, worked up? You just see him in his living room, holding his chin, going, what's going on here?
1 second. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. So he's not answering his phone. I'm just going to say, hey, call me back, and we'll get you in over the phone. This is great content, hey? In the meantime, we're going to leave his smiling face up there. So, Noodles, we'll skip over that one, and we're going to get to Arizona. So the question I have for you, right, the possibilities are out there. And I mean, the momentum seems to be that there's going to have to be a switch, even though that the organization sent a letter saying they remain committed to trying to figure it out, right? They did. But they said they'll play one more season in the 5K seat Mullet Arena. But the possibilities for relocation, Atlanta, Kansas City, Salt Lake City, Quebec, let's throw Greater Toronto in there as well. The question I have for you is, where do you think the rest of the league, the rest of the players in the league want Arizona to move to if they're going to? Where would you have wanted to go of those cities? What are the good cities? I'm going to try and get Pierre back here.
I played in Houston. I think that could absolutely be a good setting. But now I'm biased. I want to see another team in Canada. I think it's either Quebec City or Toronto. I would love that. For me, because it's great. As you know, we're in the media. It's great for content. If you had a second team in Toronto or a team in Quebec City where, you're seeing the attendance at at the Quebec League finals, like they're getting 18,000 people in these buildings. Like I did Quebec, and keep in mind, early in my career, I played against the Quebec Nordiques. It was unbelievable. I loved that city. I loved the building, the support they got.
Yep.
So I'm
Quebec.
biased because I'm saying Quebec or Toronto. Like that's because I want more content being in the media.
Pierre, I asked Jamie, by the way, welcome back, my friend.
There he is.
Yeah, the Wi-Fi crapped out.
Spend a little money, buddy. Up the speed of.
Yeah.
You know, you do a podcast, man. Spend some money on the internet in your house. I asked Jamie where he thought NHL players wanted the league to move to if it were going to move. So he says Toronto or Quebec for him. I'll ask you, Pierre, where you think the most likely is. You are the information guy. Remembering that this is our quick hitters segment.
Yeah, it seems like the early relocation front runner is Salt Lake City, but there's so much that's going to play out here. You know, Bill Daly sent me an email yesterday saying he doesn't see any scenario in which the Coyotes don't play in Mullet Arena at least for another year.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, the league does want to try and find a local solution in Phoenix area first. But clearly, relocation is on the table now in a serious way. Salt Lake City has emerged as a possibility. You know, the Utah Jazz owner, tweeted something recently. So who knows where all that goes. Maybe the Phoenix Suns owner comes to the rescue. So all these things will play out. But as someone else at the league told me yesterday, there is no relocation possibility that has been, ruled out. So you can't rule out Quebec City. Toronto's not happening. Toronto would be what I would want and what the players I think would want. I've always said there should be two teams in Toronto playing in the same rink for HR reasons alone. But the league just, it's just not something Gary Bettman wants to do, and we don't have time to get into it. So that's where all that is. And we'll see where it goes. But to me, I think that current ownership in Arizona is probably going to need to sell that team, and then we'll see what that means.
All right, you got in just under the whistle, just under the quick hitters whistle here. Your choice for general manager of the year, and a reminder that voting happens between these rounds, so it's kind of happening.
Which is so dumb.
All right, you're not getting sidetracked. We did that last podcast. Settle down. Bill Zito, Don Sweeney, Ron Francis, Kelly McCrimmon, Rob Blake. Some possibilities, each of them with pretty good years. Noodles, you look like you're ready to pounce on this. What do you think?
Was Don Waddell in there too?
Sure, throw him in there if you want. This is the list I have in front of me.
I was going to say Noodles. Good job by you.
Good pickup.
Like I was listening. I'm like, Don Waddell, I think had a pretty good season. And
you're not allowed to question the host. You questioned the host.
Don Waddell, that's my guy.
You like it, eh?
Oh, if you want somebody else, I'll give you somebody else. I think.
No, go with that. It was a heck of a year.
Don Sweeney had a great year. He didn't have the great result that he wanted.
Yeah. Pierre?
Also got Pasternak on a cheap deal.
Yeah.
Good point.
I mean, Bill Zito, since the voting is when you're down to 4 teams.
Yeah.
By the way, why don't we just wait till they award the Stanley Cup and pick that GM?
Just give it to that GM?
But here's why. I mean, geez, Kyle Dubas mentioned Florida unsolicited by himself the other day and said, Bill Zito last summer was hammered for not bringing back Andrew Brunette and Paul Maurice. And he was second guessed at the time. I know it seems silly now. Everyone's like, no, we knew it was going to work out. Okay. Trading a top 4D in Uyghur and a guy that a lot of people have in their Hart Trophy ballot in Jonathan Huberdeau for Matthew Tkachuk. A lot of people thought he gave up too much. And listen, they've only made the playoffs by a hair. But the vision that he had in terms of, and I've spent obviously a couple of weeks with the Panthers, they've had a culture shift in that Panthers dressing room. And that's what Bill Zito was trying to do. And they play differently now. Sure, they got some breaks, but listen, they just beat out Boston and Toronto, man. And it's not just about this year. There's a path and a vision here about what this team will be in the next several years.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah.
Zito would be my choice too. Okay, Conn Smythe, front runner entering the Final Four. Some possibilities. Bobrovsky, His 2.82, 918 is impressive. Eichel's 6.8, 14 in 11 games. I'll throw Heiskanen in there. Rupe Hintz has to be a front runner. Matthew Tkachuk has been fantastic. 16 points in his 12 games. He's plus 10. Pierre, you want to take this one first?
I'll go Rupe Hintz. Just think it's not just his production, but how timely a lot of his moments are for that Dallas Stars team. So consistent, hard to score in the playoffs, boy. I mean, Matthew Tkachuk's been awesome, but he didn't score in the second round against the Leafs. So I'll go Hintz.
I'm going Bob. I don't think
Shocker, the goalie.
Well, think about it. Okay, so how close were they losing in Game 5 in Boston if he doesn't make that breakaway save on Brad Marchand?
Absolutely.
That's the TSN turning point for them right there.
Yeah,
because that's over in 5. That's over in 5 if he doesn't.
I forgot that. Man, that was crazy. Yeah,
what a moment!
Insane.
What a moment!
I was watching it live. I was. I jumped off my couch. I was like, I'm like, Marchand delivers. He's a clutch guy. He scored that 9 out of 10 times. Bob makes that save like he's practicing breakaways in practice. Like it's just calm and cool. He steals a couple games against the Leafs. I thought he was brilliant in Game 2. I think was it. He stole that game. So for me, it's Bob right now. Even though Alex Lyon was the guy. Like Bob was an afterthought after they got down.
Crazy.
What was it? Against Boston. So for me, it's Bob right now.
Hintz, I know how, I shouldn't say I know, but it is so hard to produce in the playoffs, and to do it at the level he's doing it is really impressive for me. All right, I know your answer to this one, Noodles. I'll let you answer this one in one word because you just made the case. Which $10 million man rehabilitated his image more in the postseason, Jack Eichel or Sergei Bobrovsky?
I was going to say they're both good answers.
Yeah, they both are great answers because I think Eichel's fantastic. He was a difference maker against the Oilers, but it's Bob. Because Bob was wearing a baseball cap near the end of the season. You're like, and I thought he just looked like he had a nice tan and was just hanging out. All of a sudden, this guy's pressed into work, and he's been brilliant.
Yeah, I'm going to go with him too, and I will add the preamble here before I answer is that I know nothing about goaltending. That's why I bother Noodles whenever I'm writing about goaltending for the Athletic. But Sergei. I wrote about Bobrovsky after Game 1 against the Leafs because I thought to myself, I better write about him tonight because who knows how the rest of the series is going to go. Boy, he proved me wrong. But one of the lines I had in that piece, and I was a little nervous putting it in because, comparisons they upset people sometimes. Bobrovsky right now with his performance reminds me so much of late career Carey Price. Hold on for a second. Where the regular season, and then the playoffs roll around, and it's like the little look in the eye suddenly perks up there, and it's like, okay, now the real hockey is starting. And I wonder if this is what the rest of Bobrovsky's career is going to look like, where I guarantee you there'll be some tough moments next year during the regular season for this guy. But then it's like if they get in again, and let's be honest, with Carey Price's health and the up and downs in his last few years, he just felt like a guy I was just waiting to see, like he did bringing into the Cup final in 21. Get me in. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. Who is the NHL's true Mr. Game 7? Peter DeBoer, 7-0 record in Game 7s. Justin Williams, retired with a record 7 goals and 15 points in 9 Game 7s. Noodles, which is more impressive? Who deserves the moniker? To me, it's the guy who's undefeated. Undefeated is undefeated. That's something.
Yeah, and we had Peter DeBoer on our show a couple of days ago laughing about it. Like, he was almost like deferring and going, well, the guys go out. But there has to be something, whether it's adjustments through the 6 games or the way you carry yourself, your demeanor. Because there are, like, look at Doc Rivers. He couldn't get it done in the NBA. That guy 10 Game 7s where it doesn't go well for. To me, your coach has to set the demeanor, the game plan, everything. And yeah, you have to have some luck. You have to have your players get it done. But only recency bias, I'll give it to DeBoer because Justin Williams, like that guy was known as a guy who got it done. But I'll give it to DeBoer just because of recency bias and what he did the other night.
I'll go Justin Williams because I have in-arena bias. I cover all those LA Kings playoff games, or most of them, when they won those 2 cups and were in the playoffs every year. And he was, I mean, you would show up to the rink that night thinking, all right, what's Justin Williams going to do tonight? Just an expectation, and then he would go out and score in the first period. So that was pretty phenomenal. I will say this about Pete DeBoer, by the way. Just want to slide this in. Last summer, when DeBoer ended up in Dallas and Bruce Cassidy ended up in Vegas and Paul Maurice ended up in Florida, there were people that in the industry, media-wise, that were like, here we go again, recycle coaches, no imagination. Well, and listen, sometimes that is true. And I do think teams have to try to have their ears and eyes open for the next young John Cooper, the next young Jared Bednar, of course. But there's also a reason, talking to a Gem about this recently, why you trust the coach who's been there. Because he knows what he's doing. Yeah. And so here we are in the Final Four, and there's Pete DeBoer and Bruce Cassidy and Paul Maurice. Sorry, I just need to get that off my chest because let's mention the fact that those hirings were not universally beloved at the time.
Yeah. Good point.
Strong point by you. Okay, 2 more and we're done. What are we going to do first? Let's go predictions, guys. Quickly, Noodles, Vegas, Dallas, Carolina, Florida. Pierre, you can sort of dance your way around figuring out how not to make a prediction because we know how much you love them. But Noodles, who do you got, my man?
Okay. Well, I've got to preface my comments by saying I have been almost 100% wrong throughout these playoffs.
Good. I'm cutting your fee in half today. I didn't realize you were so.
I had Winnipeg. I had Edmonton. I had Boston. I had Colorado beating Seattle. It's just like
everyone did.
Touched,
Come on.
I know, but everything I touched was the exact opposite.
Yeah, it's a bracket buster of the year.
I don't know if these teams want me to choose them. I slept on Vegas. I feel like Vegas, even though I love Peter DeBoer and I think Dallas might be the more complete team, I think for some reason just Vegas. Do you trust the goaltending? But Sean Burke and that goaltending crew, we'll just call the crew of the 5 goalies that they've had this year. I think Vegas in the West. The Bruce Cassidy's done a great job there too. And in the East, the easy for me would be Rod Brindamore and Carolina. They just play the same way. But again, everyone slept on Florida. And we just talked about Bob. Yep. And I think Florida might have more game breakers. I think Montour on the back end might be a game breaker. That being said, the one thing that's been consistent throughout all of this, the decors for these 4 teams are elite. And that might be, if this is a copycat league, take a look at the decors for these 4 teams that are left and some of the top-tier Norris caliber defensemen where, other teams that are looking to push through, they're missing. Where, the Vegas has 2 of them. Dallas has 1 of them for sure in Heiskanen. Obviously in Carolina, it's Slavin and Burns. And in Florida, it's Montour and Ekblad who are really good too. So, and you throw, so anyway, I'm Carolina and
heavy
Florida
glove hand. Heavy glove hand. Heavy glove hand. Heavy glove hand.
Look at that glove hand. I'm trying to show this here.
Man, there looks heavy.
Look at that glove hand.
That looks
heavy glove hand.
Oh boy. Here, what do you got, buddy?
Carolina Dallas Cup final.
Yeah.
By the way, I love the point you made about the blue line talent late in the playoffs here. It's not like there wasn't, blue line talent in the Cup final ago in Tampa and Colorado. So yes, build your team around your blue line. Please.
All right.
But yeah, Carolina Dallas, because in the West, while I think it's a flip of a coin, at some point it needs to matter that Jake Ottinger is the best goalie left in the playoffs. Maybe Sergei Bobrovsky is, but it's got to matter. It's got to matter that he's that guy.
I got Florida and Vegas. Florida just has something this year. Love the swagger. Love
we
the
have opposites, Brian. I love it.
The giant topplers. I love it. And Vegas, I just saw what they did against the best team in the NHL for the last 40 games or so. That team, as Ken Holland said, that's a real team. It's not by accident that they're, 4 or 6 years? Pretty ridiculous. Okay, we're going to do a late red card, yellow card, no card. but I'm starting the anthem, so we have a finite amount of time to get this done. Got to get it done before the show theme song ends. Radko Gudas, right in the face of a fallen opponent. We've all seen the picture. We've all seen the moment. I get it. But red card, yellow card, or no card for him doing that in that moment. Noodles, you're the tender. I feel like I know which way you're going to go with this.
No, I'm no card. Honestly,
Really?
I think context. He might have just been yelling as somebody snapped that photo, but that might have been just a
No
split second.
chance. He's right in the. He's like this. He's just right in the guy's grill. Like he knew what he was doing.
You know what? You know what the playoffs are? Players that play for keeps. He plays for keeps. He shook his hand in the handshake line. I have no problem with it.
Yeah, you asked the wrong guy. I'm a Radko Gudas fan. I mean, that guy. I mean, you want him on your team in the playoffs, boy. And the Panthers got a few of those guys.
He plays for keeps. They play for keeps.
I agree. You know what? I'm going yellow card. I didn't like it. I think there's a certain player who would never in a million years do that. And then there's a guy who would. I didn't love it.
And guess what? The guys who wouldn't do that, they're sitting watching.
I'd say most of his. All right, fair enough. Jamie McLennan for the win on a day where, for the most part, he took a pretty good beating. Great job, Noodles. Thanks for coming on, man. We really love having you.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, we'll see you on Overdrive a little later today. Pierre, we'll chat next week, my friend. Pierre LeBrun and Jamie McLennan. That'll wrap up the podcast, folks. Thank you so much for your downloads and your subscriptions. We really appreciate it. And a big thanks to our sponsors, Cross Country Canada Supplies and Rentals, Liberty Smart Security, and Kuma Outdoor Gear as well. Have yourselves a fantastic finish to your day, and we'll talk soon. Cheers.
Yeah, heavy glove hand. Why? Yeah, heavy glove hand. Why did he have the heaviest glove hand in the league?
Was that a knock on him? That laugh of Struds.
I used to think it was lazy. When I first started, I thought it was a lazy glove, and then I realized it was just heavy. It was heavy. It's like you had a weight in it.
We want to tell you about a truly Canadian company. Cross Country Canada Supplies and Rentals provides equipment and supplies to all facets of the Canadian construction industry. But what sets them apart is their get-her-done attitude. It's a core value of their company. I've been to the offices. I've seen how they proudly display that on the wall at each branch. Every one of the staff members lives by the get-her-done formula to ensure they'll never let their customers down. They'll bend over backwards to get their clientele what they need when they need it. They don't make excuses. Cross Country Canada takes great pride in this attitude, and they truly believe that the success of their customer is their success. You can't get much more Canadian than that.